You. If you clicked on this video, I know something very specific about you. You're the type of person that creates Excel files that are insanely messy, very difficult to follow, and whenever you try to go back to them a few months later, you have no idea what the is going on. Now this causes you to waste a lot of time, you have to retrace your steps, you make a bunch of mistakes on the way, and it just doesn't look good. So today, I'm going to show you a very simple 3-step process that makes you literally excited to go back to your Excel analyses. This was shown to me a couple of years ago, and every single time I do an Excel analysis, I always follow these steps. And trust me, if you can do this yourself, you're going to be in really good shape. Now let me show you how it's done using New York City's city bike data as an example. So this first step is creating a tab called Information. And the point of this tab is to give as much information to whoever is going to be reading this in the future, whether it's you or some colleague. The first section is called the context section, and this is where you're trying to give as much context as possible to whoever is going to be looking at this Excel. So in this case, I'm just giving some details on what this Excel analysis is on, as well as an important note that this data is only limited to the past 3 years. The second section is called Instruction, and this is where you want to give any information on how somebody should be interacting with your Excel file. So in this case, if someone wants to refresh the data, then they can use the query below and paste it in the data tab. If you want to give any instructions on anything else, you can put it here. And the third section is the query section. And in my case, I like to code in SQL. So I put my SQL code over here. But if you're coding in Python, or if you're getting your data from some internal service or from a website, this is where you'd put that information. That way it's super clear where the data is coming from and how they can replicate it themselves. Now, once you get this boring administrative stuff out of the way, we can move ourselves to the second tab, which I call Data. And it's pretty self-explanatory. The Data tab is where you put your data. But I find a lot of people make a very big mistake with this type of section, and it's that they like to mix data with the actual analysis. You really need to keep data separate from all of your pivot tables and your pivot charts and any of your analyses. Because when you mix the two, that's where things get super messy and kind of difficult to follow. And if you have multiple different data sources, then I would recommend just creating different tabs for each of those. Again, that way it's nice, clean, separate, and organized. So now that you have the information set up, the data set up, we can do the fun part, which is the analysis. And in this new tab, I call it the pivot tab. And this is where you write all of your pivot tables and your pivot charts and go deep into your analysis, knowing full well and being comforted by the fact that everything else on your Excel sheet is nice and organized. I still see a lot of people make very messy analyses, so I'm going to give 3 tips on how to make things super clear. The first thing is, if you know that you're going to be refreshing the data, make sure that the pivot tables are not going to overlap with each other. So in this case, I'm looking at days of the week. I know that if I refresh this, there isn't going to be another day of the week that's going to invent itself. So I know that these 2 pivot tables will not intersect. The second thing you want to do is, if ever you create a pivot chart like I did over here, make sure you put it above or next to the pivot table that it's associated with. This helps a lot because sometimes you're going to have a bunch of pivot charts, and if they're all over the place, it's kind of difficult to know which ones are associated to which tables. And this just keeps it super clean. And the last tip is, make sure to put the pivot tables next to each other. As someone that uses a lot of Excel analyses, it's not very enjoyable to see a bunch of different pivot tables in different sections, up, left, below, on the right. It just gets very messy. So keeping them on a simple row like this makes it much easier to navigate through. And if you get to a point where there's just too many, you can create another tab called Pivot 2, where you'll have more pivot tables and pivot charts. Now, if you got to the end of this video, there's a really good chance that you're the type of person that likes your analyses to be super clean, organized, and intuitive. And the thing you probably hate the most is very messy and hard to read pivot tables. So if you want some more tips on how to make super clean and professional looking pivot tables, make sure to watch this video, which I just created. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.